do our entire budget on one major piece or two major pieces. What we did was we tried to get a variety, and the Knox hats went out of business, the theater is no longer there. The nice thing about it is that I thought it was a photograph when we first saw it.
It's
really great.
Yeah.
Really.
This is a piece by utilizing our funds very carefully. We were able to get quite a good.
Something's going on.
Mr. President.
In his
Area and the seed, we have natural seed, but of course we just set up the chair, and that's usually where we hold commencement. And it gives you a very good view of this side of the building also.
You know, it's a very compact arrangement.
It really is.
Very compact. And when
now all around here are additional offices. Yes. And we did an excellent job. You'll see that when you get a chance to examine it up close.
It was you know, one of these things of just zipping by. So pleased to meet you. Yes, well, I heard about you too in the literature.
Skylights from here all the way back.
This is Mrs. Evers?
Yes.
How are you? Very well. You are?
For the civil rights movement of the 1960s. The name was Medgar Evers, and the fury unleashed by his death fueled passage of major civil rights legislation. Back in 1963, Evers' murder seemed like an open and shut case. All evidence pointed to one man, a white supremacist who went to trial twice but was never convicted because of hung juries. But now the rusty wheels of justice may be moving again. Prime time has discovered new witnesses and evidence that could lead to a retrial. Jay Shadler begins his report by taking you back to an era of hatred and violence.
One has to put oneself in that time and place. Racism was very bold. Hatred was very bold at that time.
You see, when you are accused of killing, no matter whether you're killing a nigger, a Jew, a white man, or a Chinaman, any murder in Dixie is not a thing that lightly goes away. So if you're accused of murder, that is forever.
Let them use their water, let them use their dogs, let them use whatever they want to use. We are not doing it.
It was 1963. America's long smoldering civil rights movement was catching fire, and no place was hotter than Jackson, Mississippi. No one more likely to feel the heat than the state leader of the NAACP, Medgar Evers.
And we're going to keep the pressure on the downtown merchants, on every store on Capitol Street, until this thing is finally solved.
For 10 years, Evers had been on the front lines here, organizing the first economic boycotts, sit-ins, and street protests, trying to pry open a small door to equality in a state where apartheid ruled and segregationists were the rulers. By filing suit that spring to integrate Jackson's all-white public schools, Evers had become the ultimate symbol of hope and the natural target of hate.
It was a time of certainly tension, fear. The newspapers printed editorials with a black band around them saying that blood was going to flow in the streets.
Myrlie Evers was Medgar's wife.
And we both knew that Medgar, being the leader, put him in a position where we knew he would be the one eliminated.
On June 11th, 1963, events here in Jackson and across the country froze into a mural of memories.
Do hereby denounce and forbid this illegal and unwarranted action by the central government.
That afternoon, Governor George Wallace stood in the doorway of the University of Alabama, denying entry to 2 black students. That evening, President Kennedy had called out the National Guard.
We are confronted primarily with a moral issue, whether we are going to treat our fellow Americans as we want to be treated.
And that night, in Jackson, Mississippi, Medgar Evers kissed his wife goodbye for the last time.
It was almost an eeriness about it, because we both realized that time was short. Jackson was about to explode.
6 hours later, Medgar Evers was dead, gunned down in his driveway after returning from a church rally.
And all of a sudden, it was this loud explosion. I guess in those few seconds, you hope against hope that the worst has not happened, that the assassin had missed. When I opened the door, Medgar had pulled himself around my car, and there was nothing I could do. That was very difficult, because we had walked that path together, and I knew that was it, and I did not want him to take his last breath without me there.
This is where Medgar Evers finally collapsed in front of his family after crawling along his driveway. Based on the power and the direction of the bullet, police knew that the assassin must have fired his shot from over there, some 200 feet away, just beyond where that truck stands today. On the ground, the police found the suspected murder weapon, a high-powered rifle traced to a self-proclaimed racist named Byron Della Beckwith.
The morning he was killed, the whole state of Mississippi just went up in jubilation.
Though Byron Beckwith refused Prime Time's request for an interview, his views on Medgar Evers' death were made clear to a local Mississippi reporter just last month.
I didn't shed a tear. No, sir. I was no more concerned with Medgar Evers' death as that than some nigger got killed in San Francisco when I was a child.
If Beckwith had a motive for murder, police knew it went beyond simple hatred. For years, he penned a steady stream of racist letters to local newspapers and the NRA, including one written just 6 months before Evers' death. Gentlemen, for the next 15 years, we here in Mississippi are going to have to do a lot of shooting to protect our wives, children, and ourselves from bad Negroes.
They're antichrist. They believe in human sacrifices, and they still do it. And all this voodoo nonsense, and you don't call those folks Christians, eating each other? These niggas over there in Africa still eating each other.
With a motive and a murder weapon, prosecutors brought Beckwith to trial. But they had to build their case before an all-white jury in a state where no white man had ever been sentenced to death for killing a black man. Still, they argued that the small circular bruise above Beckwith's eye would perfectly match the cut caused when a rifle scope slapped back against an assassin's face. Not so, said Beckwith. He'd just been, quote, shooting varmints.
I did have a cut over my eye.
Well, how did that cut get on you?
Well, hell, from shooting from a prone position.
Police also found a fresh fingerprint on the rifle scope. It was Byron Beckwith's. Easy to explain, he replied. A burglar had coincidentally stolen his rifle just before the murder.
My rifle was stolen out of my house several days before this Negro turned up dead.
And the fingerprint?
Well, hell, don't you clean your gun? Don't you clean the lens of your camera? Don't be such a damn fool.
Beckwith's alibi was linked to 2 off-duty policemen from his hometown of Greenwood.
This is a Citizens Council Forum, the American viewpoint with a Southern accent.
Like Beckwith, they both belong to the openly racist White Citizens Council. And they claim they saw Beckwith in Greenwood, 90 miles from Jackson, just minutes after the murder. Unable to contradict that testimony with any witness who could place Beckwith in Jackson that night, the prosecutors were left with their circumstantial case. Twice, all white juries deadlocked on a verdict. And Beckwith went home a free man, still claiming, as he does today, he wasn't in Jackson the night Medgar Evers was killed.
Well, of course I wasn't there. What makes you think I was there? Has anybody told you I was there?
No.
Has anybody proved I was there?
That couldn't be true. He was here.
Willie Osborne is one of 4 witnesses that Prime Time has now located who swear Byron Beckwith was not only in Jackson that night, but at the very church rally where Medgar Evers had spent his final hours.
On the night of the rally, the night Medgar Evers died, you believe you saw Byron Beckwith in here?
I did.
Where did you see him?
Right by the light switch there.
Show me exactly what he was doing.
In this position, with hands like this, like he was observing the congregation.
You're certain that it was Byron Beckwith?
Byron Beckwith.
You're sure of that?
I'm sure of that. I could say that anyway.
Could you say it in court?
That's right.
Now, Mr. Osborne said that he saw him in the back of the church.
Well, most likely he came in that way because he didn't come in through this way.
Reverend R.L.T. Smith was also here that night and agrees with Osborne that Beckwith's alibi is a lie.
And where was Byron Beckwith?
Right over there, on the east side of the church, on the front row.
You're certain that it was Byron Beckwith?
According to the picture, yes.
No doubt in your mind?
No doubt whatever.
Both men say fear of Beckwith and mistrust of Mississippi's legal system have kept them from telling their stories until now.
During the first 2 trials, why didn't you come forward and say, I saw Byron Beckwith here?
Well, I never was called to the trial on that.
No prosecutor ever contacted you?
No.
How about you, Mr. Smith? You said you saw Byron Beckwith. Did a prosecutor?
If I had testified, the jury would have cleared him before I finished testifying.
Within 2 days of our conversations here, investigators from the district attorney's office conducted their own interviews with Osborne and Smith, encouraged by the new witnesses.
You know, we're beginning to follow up on the information that, you know, that we just recently got from y'all.
And curious about another interview Prime Time was about to have with this man.
In your opinion, who killed Medgar Evers?
I think it was Byron D. Beckwith.
Delmar Dennis is a former Ku Klux Klansman and an FBI informant. In 1967, his insider testimony helped convict the killers of 3 well-known civil rights workers in Philadelphia, Mississippi. He also knows a little about Byron Beckwith.
Well, he was certainly a Klan hero. Very much so.
Months after Beckwith's last trial, Dennis says he attended a secret Klan meeting, called in part to honor Beckwith as the murderer of Medgar Evers.
Well, it was a highly charged kind of meeting. The perimeters were guarded by Klansmen with high-powered rifles, and the motivational or inspirational or special speaker of the night was Beckwith. And he made a statement something like, killing that nigger didn't cause me very much problems. I didn't go through any more problems than your wives go through to have babies for you.
When he said killing that nigger, who did you think he was talking about?
I thought he was talking about Medgar Evers, and that's why he was there. He was a hero to the Klan because the Klan at least believed that he did it.
Was there anyone in that audience who thought he was talking about anybody other than Medgar Evers?
No, I wouldn't think so.
When the crowd heard that he was essentially boasting about how easy it was to kill Medgar Evers, how did the crowd react?
Lots of amens. They were in agreement that we ought to be more involved in killing.
Later that night, Dennis says he reported Beckwith's admission of murder to FBI agents, but Beckwith's trial was already over, and Dennis's testimony was never used.
You don't kill people unless it is for your self-preservation, the preservation of your race, color, or creed. That covers it.
It is tempting to think that Beckwith's racist rhetoric is just that, words alone.
When you keep on aggravating.
Last Friday was the 27th anniversary of the death of Malcolm X. There is no holiday named after him. He never achieved the worldwide acclaim of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Yet Malcolm X is currently capturing the imagination and the conscience of millions of Americans. On college campuses across America, his image is heroic. The autobiography of Malcolm X, written by Alex Haley, who died suddenly 2 weeks ago, has sold over 6 million copies in 8 languages. And filmmaker Spike Lee is in production now on a $33 million film that will tell the tale of Malcolm. Malcolm X, who until he was gunned down at the age of 39, flashed across the consciousness of America for a mere 5 years with a message that was unmistakable.
We are peaceful people. We are loving people. We love everybody who loves us. But we don't love anybody who doesn't love us. We're nonviolent with people who are nonviolent with us. But we are not nonviolent with anyone who is violent with us.
When he was 17 years old, this man who had become a hero to blacks was dealing drugs, pimping, and robbing. Harlem was his base, until he crossed a fellow hustler and had to leave town. He went to Massachusetts, where a series of burglaries led to his arrest at the age of 20. And then, while serving 7 years in prison, he was converted to the teachings of a man named Elijah Muhammad, converted to a new black religion called the Nation of Islam, the Black Muslims.
It was the Honorable Elijah Muhammad who was his prophet, who was the man he admired more than anybody in the world.
Malcolm truly believed in the beginning in the divinity of Elijah Muhammad, and this affected him.
Malcolm's good friend, the actor Ossie Davis, read the eulogy at his funeral, and he talked with us about how Malcolm got religion and more.
Malcolm in prison not only got converted, even more important, he became educated. And that's the importance of Malcolm to the young folks today, in my opinion, is not based on the rhetoric, but it is the mechanism by which he changed himself from a pimp and a hustler to a man of moral stature and conviction and leadership in the world. Education was the key, and he educated himself.
Malcolm X became the most visible, the most vocal leader of the Nation of Islam. That religion imposed a strict moral discipline on its followers, aimed at keeping blacks from falling into drugs and crime. Its message? Black pride.
Thousands of years ago, the black man in Africa was living in palaces. The black man in Africa was wearing silk. The black man in Africa had mastered the arts and the sciences. He knew the course of the stars in the universe before the man up in Europe knew that the earth wasn't flat. Is that right or wrong?
In 1959, when I reported for this documentary showing Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X, and the black Muslims, to an America that had barely heard of them, most Negroes wanted desperately to integrate. But these black Muslims preached instead that blacks were a race superior to whites, and they called for a separate black nation.
These black supremacists, Muslims and black nationalists, are not practitioners of hate just for hate's sake. They did not grow in a vacuum. Rather, theirs is the hate that hate has produced. The hate that some Negroes are returning for the hate most American Negroes have received for the past 300 years.
That's why Elijah Muhammad decreed that no black Muslim could speak to a white reporter. So Louis Lomax, a black reporter who had brought me the story, interviewed Malcolm about the Muslim teachings.
You can go to any little Muslim child and ask him where is hell or who is the devil, and he wouldn't tell you that hell is down in the ground or that the devil is something invisible that you can't see. He'll tell you hell is right where he has been catching it, and he'll tell you who the one who is responsible for him having received this hell is the devil.
And he would say that this devil is the white man.
Yes.
You wrote, Malcolm scared hell out of the rest of us, bred as we are to caution, to hypocrisy in the presence of white folks, to the smile that never fades. What do you mean?
Well, Malcolm was the man who came along and said, all that stuff that you are doing is hypocrisy, it's false, And you should be ashamed of yourself. You should stand up to the world, white man and all, and say, you're a man, I'm a man. If you don't believe it, you know, let's duke it or whatever. You know, there are times when you need somebody to shake you and push you and make you face certain truths. Malcolm insisted that we do it.
If many blacks were moved by his message of black pride, moderate blacks were shocked and whites were frightened. Through the early 60s, Malcolm criticized the traditional civil rights movement as ineffectual, said he didn't want to integrate with his enemy, and he didn't. And he responded to violence against blacks in the South, like the bombing of a church that killed 4 young girls, with a call for self-defense.
If the government can't defend us, what should we do? If the government doesn't want us to pick up a rifle, then defend us. Go find out who bombed the church in Birmingham, Alabama. And if they can't find out, then let us go find out. And when we find, I don't want to hear that. And when we find out who it was who murdered our little female babies, then the law of justice is that a murderer should be murdered. That's the law of justice in any land. And if the government can't do it, then let's you and I do it.
Many read this as a call for violent action in direct opposition to the nonviolence advocated by Martin Luther King. We asked Alex Haley, the author of Roots and of the autobiography of Malcolm X, about the two men.
What did he think of Martin Luther King?
I didn't know Dr. King as well as I knew Malcolm by any means, but I did do a rather lengthy Playboy interview of Dr. King. He would sort of hedge around a while, and it might be 45 minutes before he would say in his very casual sort of Southern way, well, what's Brother Malcolm saying about me these days? And then I would go back to New York. Malcolm, unlike Dr. King, the first thing out of his mouth, what did he say about me? It was so interesting.
Were they jealous of each other?
I wouldn't say jealous, because I think they both had a very distinct sense that they were both working toward the same objective, but different paths.
Opposite sides of the same coin.
Yes, exactly.
Today, Yolanda King, the daughter of the man who preached nonviolence, and Atala Shabazz, the daughter of the man who preached by any means necessary, are friends. And Atala Shabazz does not believe the two men were all that different.
Malcolm said, by any means necessary, and that was interpreted as meaning violence if it becomes necessary. And Martin King, no.
Said by no means, but you have to think about my father in the time that he was reigning, if I may use that terminology. He was never arrested. He never incited the crowd to misbehave. And in incidences where there were riots to be started, he was one to calm them. So by any means necessary might mean something like read, think, look on the other side of it, be objective.
Objective was not a word you often heard used about Malcolm X. To most of America, he was a rabble-rouser. In the early 60s, Malcolm's growing prominence as national spokesman for the black Muslims began to cause jealousy in the ranks. And by late 1963, he was cast out of the Nation of Islam, obviously at the direction of Elijah Muhammad. Beyond mere jealousy was the fact that Malcolm had learned something. And in 1964, Malcolm told me what it was, that a number of young women, black Muslim sisters, who had become pregnant over the years, had been forced out of the Muslim community.
When the 4 of them got back to Chicago and began to compare notes, they found that the same man was the father of all 4 of their children and had also been the father of the children brought forth by the 2 secretaries who preceded them.
Who was the father of all of these various children you have enumerated?
The father was Elijah Muhammad himself.
I mean, what a disillusion that must have been for this man.
At the very end, when he came to visit Ruby and me, and for the first time, he came totally by himself. Nobody got no driver. And he just sat in the corner and talked. The burden of his conversation basically was, oh, my father, why have you left me?
No longer under the sway of Elijah, Malcolm was freed of the dogma, and he began to reevaluate. He went to Africa and made a pilgrimage to Mecca, where he learned about traditional Islamic religion. And on his return in 1964, I saw a dramatic change in Malcolm.
Then the white man is no longer the devil and evil.
The Holy Quran teaches us to judge a man by his conscious behavior, by his intention. So I judge a man by his conscious behavior. I am not a racist. I don't subscribe to any of the tenets of racism.
And so you feel that there are good whites and good blacks, and bad whites and bad blacks.
It's not a case of being good and bad, good or bad blacks and whites. It's a case of being good or bad human beings.
Malcolm went to the Organization of African Unity and got them to take a vote against racism in America.
Our effort is to try and get it recognized not as a Negro problem or a United States problem, but a world problem, a human problem. And we think that the only way to get America, the racist element in America, to change their attitude is by bringing outside pressure and world pressure to bear.
You announced when you left the black Muslims that you were organizing a politically oriented black nationalist party.
It's not a black nationalist party.
Oh, what is it?
Our political, economic, and social philosophy is black nationalism.
How many members do you have?
At the present time, we have no members.
Where does your financing come from now?
Right now, I have no financing. The only financing we have are the Muslims who are still with me.
Well, how do you
It was during that interview that I asked him if he wasn't fearful that the black Muslims might seek retribution for his exposure of Elijah Muhammad.
Are you not, perhaps, afraid of what might happen to you as a result of making these revelations?
Oh, yes. I probably am a dead man already.
That was prophetic. 8 months later, in February of 1965, Malcolm X was shot down at the age of 39 during a rally at the Audubon Ballroom in New York. Death came to Malcolm before he could achieve what he was after, a new movement he called the Organization for Afro-American Unity to fight for justice for American blacks. His wife Betty and 4 daughters were in the audience that day. There were some who believed the FBI was responsible. But Atala Shabazz, who watched her father gunned down, believes her father was killed by the black Muslims, what she called simply the nation.
So when people say that indeed perhaps there were members of the nation who pulled the trigger, perhaps there was a joint conspiracy. That might be so. The government is involved in most of things in our lives, but it does not exempt the fact that members of the nation have blood on their hands. And I was a child who has that picture forever.
The world is just now getting to know the Malcolm X his daughter knew. Today his message touches young blacks in ways that even Martin Luther King's message never touched.
Roll sound.
That is why Spike Lee chose to make this film about him, starring Denzel Washington as Malcolm. The producers are wagering $30 million that the film will strike a nerve among white Americans as well as black Americans.
But why Malcolm X? There are
because
5, 10 of...
Who? I don't want to name names, but the black masses do not feel like these other guys are doing what needs to be done. So, nobody's directing to go to Malcolm, but Malcolm speaks to them.
We declare our right on this earth to be a man, to be a human being, to be respected as a human being, to be given the rights of a human being in this society, on this earth, in this day, which we intend to bring into existence by any means necessary.
10 years ago, BMW started a driving school in America.
Feel the car turn it. Get your sight picture through the windshield. Look around the A-pillar post.
While this may seem an unusual venture for a car company, for BMW, it's a natural extension of an inherent belief.
The better a car feels to you, the better a car is engineered.
That's quite a feeling to be able to go around a corner like that.
The better driver you become.
A belief that a well-engineered automobile should do more than simply improve the driver's image.
And brake. Good, comeback.
It should improve nothing less than the driver's ability.
And I felt like I had control of the car instead of the car having control of me.
Because you have this instilled confidence between you and the vehicle.
But this car has a real different feel than my car.
This car feels like an extension of you. And that, to me, also is the sense of safety and the sense of control.
A better driver. The ultimate goal of the ultimate driving machine.
Explore the majestic Serengeti in Florida at Busch Gardens.
Wherever the sun glows, wherever the wind blows, wherever the water flows, where we survive. This is my home.
And if your family feels at home on the beach, the St. Petersburg Clearwater beaches are minutes away from Busch Gardens at Tampa Bay. No place else.
In here, Miss Rollins. Some patients' worst colds are at the end of the season. Good time to try this, Advil Cold and Sinus. It has 2 ingredients doctors like for colds. One for pain, another for congestion. Each has been recommended over 20 million times. And they're both right here, without a prescription. And not a moment too soon.
Tough on colds like Advil is on pain. Advil Cold and Sinus, advanced formula for the cold season.
In 1884, William Tecumseh Sherman told his fellow Republicans, if nominated, I will not accept. If elected, I will not serve. And he wonders why more people haven't said that. Sure would save them a lot of trouble.
Politicians are at it again, and they're having a terrible time winning us over. When it comes right down to it, we don't want any of them, Democrats or Republicans. It takes someone with an awful lot of ego to think that he's smart enough to be the President of the United States, or even a congressman. And that's one of the problems. We don't want a politician who's so conceited he thinks he's smart enough to lead us, so we set out to take them down a peg or two. We find their weak spots. When politicians are charged with doing something wrong, whether they're guilty or not, they have a few standard answers. First thing they do, of course, is they deny it.
Absolutely, flatly deny the allegations of impropriety, any impropriety. There is no merit to them. There is no truth to them, and I deny them.
Did I do anything illegal or wrong? I did not.
One very popular line politicians have used over the years when they're caught with their hands in the till is the 20/20 hindsight excuse.
Are there things I'd do differently if I had them to do over again? Oh, boy. How many may I name for you?
Politician can also simply admit he or she was wrong and apologize.
I apologize for the offense given.
However innocent and unintended, it was insensitive and wrong.
That's been the popular thing for politicians to do lately, apologize. Long after it's obvious to everyone else that they're wrong, they try to sound humble and honest by admitting that they're wrong. They do it in a way that suggests they don't really believe they were wrong.
I know you're hurting. 2, I care about it. 3, I've been wrong about how fast this recovery would take.
Have I made mistakes? Oh, boy, how many? I made a lot of mistakes.
Anyone who attacks a politician has to expect retaliation. Wounded politician is a dangerous animal.
Totally preposterous, scurrilous, and really probably an all-time low, even for 60 Minutes.
I admit we're awfully tough on politicians, but after all, they should have known that when they decided to run for office. They're so smart, how come they wanted to be politicians in the first place?
2 weeks ago, during a story we called Buy American, a Chevrolet salesman named Matt Darcy came right out and said it.
I don't have to buy something because American makes it. If American makes a good product, I buy it. But if they don't, I buy what's good for my money.
Thinking it is one thing, saying it another, especially in Detroit. Shortly after our broadcast, Matt Darcy got fired, but he's already had 10 new offers. I'm Steve Croft. We'll be back next week with another edition of 60 Minutes.
To show the world how durable Nissans are, we sent our racing team to this year's Rolex 24 Hours at Daytona. They not only won, but were so far ahead they had time to pull over and wash the car, just so it would look good at the finish line. We thought waxing it would have been a bit arrogant.
Sarah, wait! What do you want with your fries?
I love your eyes too, darling.
The Big Mac or the Quarter Pounder with cheese. What do you want with your fries?
What you want is what you get at McDonald's today.
All over America, more people repurchase Kenmore appliances than any other brand. In fact, over 1 out of 2 homes in the country count on Kenmore. And right now, you can save $64 on this Kenmore washer dryer pair and get this Kenmore refrigerator for just $599.99. Only at Sears Brand Central.
When you're cooking your best, nothing tastes quite like butter. Nothing bastes quite like butter. Nothing bakes quite like butter.
Butter.
Butter! When you're cooking your best, nothing tastes quite like butter.
Are you an Olympic eater?
Number 12 is just out of the penalty box.
Look at that couple's style. Those moves are perfectly synchronized.
He's picking up speed as he nears the bottom of the course.
Is eating your favorite sport? Is eating your favorite sport?